Many months into the current COVID-19 crisis, and we still have a very high rate of infection in many parts of our country. Positivity rates are as high as 20%, which means there's a lot of community spread. There's a lot of virus. And even though we have performed over 65 million tests as of this recording, it is nowhere close to where we need to be able to accurately find out how many people are infected, how to contact trace, and how to really bring this whole thing under control. So there is demand for more and more testing. And we are running out of testing capacity because all this testing has to be performed in highly complex labs with highly trained professionals. The tests authorized by FDA so far are not yet available for rapid over-the-counter testing. There are some rapid testing available, but most of them are done in high complexity labs. So this is a real problem. In this video, I'm going to talk about a potential solution to this problem that now is available. And I have made this video exclusively for subscribers like you because I know you appreciate a little bit more detail, a deeper dive, not a superficial explanation, because you want to understand things at a deeper level. So in this video, we're going to talk about a potential solution that is now available to solve this testing capacity problem. Recently, FDA has authorized 2 different RT-PCR tests for an additional indication of what they call pooled testing. In a pooled testing, you combine different specimens together and you test them all at once. Thereby, you basically reduce the number of tests that you have to perform on each individual sample. And if you reduce the number of tests you have to perform, you can be more efficient and you can provide results back to the patient or the doctor in a timely way. They don't have to wait as long. You can conserve on reagents which happen to be in short supply. So these are all the benefits, but it is not without risk. So we have to understand the benefit-risk balance by looking at this situation in a little bit more detail. And I know that's what subscribers like you appreciate. So I'm going to dig deeper into the pool testing, how it works, and what are some of the benefits and risks. So let's look into that. Taking a step back, so far FDA has authorized over 200 tests. So it is not like we have shortage of the different types of tests available. We have over 170 RT-PCR tests. These are highly accurate, very sensitive tests to detect the presence of the virus. 37 antibody tests and 2 antigen tests. So we have a lot of different tests available. But we are still running out of capacity. So when is pooling useful? Pooling is useful when the testing volume exceeds lab capacity. They cannot keep up, which is what the situation is right now. And the testing reagents are in short supply, again, which is what the situation is right now. Now, in some areas, there are low positivity rates, and that's where it'll be most efficient because you can test a large amount of samples by pooling them together. This strategy is not very efficient when the positivity rate is over 25%. Ideally, it should be less than 10%. And I'll explain to you why. In the past, this has been applied for HIV, hepatitis B, and C viruses when they were very high rates of infection. And again, we had a similar situation. So this is not the first time that this has been done. So we understand how it works. In the context of COVID-19, it is slightly more challenging because it's a new virus and we are still trying to understand how it works and how these tests are performing in the real world. So there's a little bit different situation, but we have more experience in the past. Okay, so what are the different possible results and actions that we need to take? Now, if you pool samples together and test them together, one of the outcomes is the virus is not detected. Or you could have positive detection of the virus, or the test may be inconclusive or invalid. So if it is not detected, you can report the result for the pool as negative. Each individual specimen you can assume is negative. But if it is detected, inconclusive or invalid, we have to repeat each specimen in the pool as a separate unpooled specimen. And that's exactly why when the positivity rate is high, this situation doesn't work very well. The reason being that you will have more positive results for the pool, and then you'll have to test each specimen all over again. So you'll actually be performing more tests, not fewer tests. One way of doing that, handling that situation, is to cut down the number of specimens in your pool. But still, this strategy doesn't work if the positivity rate is very high. Okay, so now let's look at the different pooling strategies. The first one is called hierarchical testing. In this case, you combine a certain number of samples together, for example, 4 in this case, and then you test them all together. And in a second stage, you may have to test individual specimen again if the result is positive. But there is a big advantage. So I show you a simulation here. So as you can see, there is a significant reduction in the number of tests with this strategy. For example, you can do this simulation on this website. I provide this reference to you. Very good online simulator. So let's take two scenarios, 5% prevalence and 10% prevalence for a test that has 95% sensitivity and 99% specificity. You can see that the optimal point is around 4 samples in the pool for 10% prevalence and about 5 samples in the pool for 5%. And you can gain up to 55% reduction in the number of tests. So that is a pretty significant difference. And you can cut down on the number of tests by pooling samples together. So that's a good advantage. Second strategy is called the array testing strategy. And this works when your liquid handling system is automated. That means you can pool many different combinations from many different samples. So in this particular case, we are showing a grid of 4 by 4. There are 16 samples. And this is a pooling direction. And this is a pooling direction for vertical sampling. This is pooling direction for horizontal sampling. So you can see you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13, 14, 15, 16. These samples are pooled this way. And here you have the vertical pooling of different combinations. So now you have 8 different pools. So here are different possibilities. You could have what they call unequivocal result. That means this is red means it's positive. So potentially you have either 1, 2, 3, or 4. One of these 4 samples, one or more may be positive. But look, you have this 2, 5, this is also positive. That means you can conclusively say that it's only sample number 2 which is positive. Or you may have a situation where this pool is positive, this pool is positive, and this pool is positive. Now you can say sample 2 and 14 are positive. You don't have to repeat the entire set of pool specimens again. So this is unequivocal result. But what happens if you have a situation like this? You have this pool positive, and these 2 pools positive. Now you have a confusion. You can have these 2 samples positive and these 2 samples positive. Or you could have a situation where this is positive and this is positive, where you cannot figure out which sample out of this whole grid is positive. So it gets a little bit more complex, and the more pool positive samples you get, the higher is the chance that you may have to repeat the whole grid all over again. But even with that, there are certain advantages, because as you can see, for the same test at 5% prevalence, and here I'm plotting the array size, the rows by columns of different samples. So let's say 4 by 4, you can get about 45% reduction in the number of tests at 5% prevalence and about 35% at 10%. But if you pooled 6, you may have a higher reduction. So there is a significant amount of reduction in tests we can accomplish by pooling these samples together. This is the advantage. So there are 2 different tests, as I talked about, which now have authorization for pooling. Quest and LabCorp. They had their EUA originally authorized in March, but then they got this additional indication for pooling in July. Pooling strategy for Quest is hierarchical and LabCorp is array. Pool size is up to 4 for Quest and up to 5 by 5 for LabCorp. Pooling method is manual for Quest and automated for LabCorp. But this is the most important result. Estimate % of false negatives at a pool size of 4. Quest reports 0 out of over 3,000 samples. False negative. So that means they are very good. But LabCorp reports 2.5% out of around 180,000 samples that they evaluated. This is the risk. The risk is false negative. So let's say you do pool testing and the pool comes out negative. You will make a wrong conclusion that individual specimens in that pool are negative because you won't test them anymore. So the risk is false negative. The other risk I should highlight is also false positives, because if you get a false positive, you will be forced to do individual specimen testing, and that will actually increase your workload, not bring it down. So we have to balance the benefit with this risk. Is 2.5% acceptable? At this time, we don't have a baseline or a benchmark. We are not sure. It sounds pretty high, and I would be concerned about this a little bit. So why does this happen? Why do false negatives happen? And that's what I want to go into next. It is based on the analysis that is done. So it's called passing Bablock regression analysis. What they do is that they look at the CT values of individual specimens on the x-axis and the CT values of the pool samples on the y-axis. Now let me take a step back and explain what these CT values are. CT is cycles to threshold. Now these tests are done in a way where the output is measurement of a fluorescent intensity. And it's repeated over a number of cycles. As more signal is gained, you get a higher signal out, because we are trying to detect this complementary DNA that came from the RNA. And you can find details of how these tests work in my other videos. But just keep in mind that we are counting the number of cycles it takes for the signal to exceed a certain threshold value in intensity. Now, higher the number, lower is the viral load. That means the concentration is lower, it takes longer. So for example, these particular samples here, they correspond to samples where you have a lower viral concentration. Maybe they came from asymptomatic patients. Maybe the patients did not have a high amount of virus in their system. And in principle, in practice, the value of CT value of 40 means the test is considered to be negative. So we don't want to have anything above 40. Now let's look into this analysis. So you generate data for individual specimens, you generate data for pool specimens, and typically they combine one known positive with 3 known negatives. And you can imagine it will be a dilution effect. So we can expect the CT value to actually shift up compared to the CT value of the original sample. This N1 and N2, these are two charts for N1 and N2 targets. These are the different gene targets in the RNA. So they're highly specific to those gene targets. But the analysis works either way. So as you can see, the CT values have been shifted up. Okay? So you will fit a line through this to assess the magnitude of the shift in the slope and the magnitude of the shift in the intercept. This analysis is very routinely done in the industry, and what it basically does, it helps you quantify the bias, the systematic bias in two measurement systems. In this case, measuring a pooled sample versus measuring an original sample. So here we can see that it is shifted up, which is true. And the regression is not very good at this end. So keep that in mind. So essentially you would fit an equation and you will calculate this X star. X star means it's the threshold, in a way threshold. If an individual specimen CT value falls between this X star and 40, you should not use that for pooling. You will have a negative result. That's what this regression is telling you. So what they are finding is that for N1, their X star is 38.3 and CT has been shifted by 1.7. And for N2, their X star is 37 and CT has been shifted by 3. So let's take a step back. I know we went through a whole lot. Let's take a step back and look at this information holistically. Why do we get a risk of false negative? Is because we are diluting a potentially positive sample with other samples who may not be positive. So our CT is expected to go up. Now we have to quantify how much of this shift we can tolerate before our false negatives just go through the roof. That's what they have done using this analysis. So in the LabCorp case, they are still coming out with an estimated false negative rate of 2.5%. I believe it's still quite high. It depends upon whether they are able to exercise additional controls. Maybe they do not include potential samples with very low viral load. Maybe they have a lower cutoff at the individual CT level than all the way they characterized to this 35, 38 value. Maybe they keep it lower. Because what it does is that it affects the limit of detection because there is a dilution effect. So we have to be very careful about the limit of detection, the dilution effect, the CT shift, and that's the risk. Very good news that there's a lot of characterization which has been done and reported in the paperwork filed with the FDA. I was able to review this information for you. So to summarize, we understand the benefits. The benefits are more efficient testing. You are not testing samples which are going to be negative anyway. You are pooling them together. As a result, you can conserve the reagents that you're going to use. You can provide the results more quickly. But the risk is false negative. And that may not be very useful because our purpose is to detect accurately. And the other risk, as I mentioned, is false positive, which is unlikely because we are going to dilute our samples anyway. But it can happen because of some procedural errors or some other errors. Bottom line is that we need to walk into this whole situation with eyes wide open. We need to understand the benefits and the risks. So far, the news is that we have 2 of these options available, and hopefully that will increase our testing capacity in a significant way. But again, keep in mind, it will not be effective when the positivity rates are high. So where you already have 15-20% positivity rates, it may not help too much. So I hope this is useful. Please let me know your feedback. Let me know any other topics that you would want me to discuss and address. Visit my website, www.exceedqm.com, because I have a lot of other articles about related topics on my blog. You can drop me a comment from there, you can write me an email, or you can follow me on LinkedIn and have a conversation with me. I really invite you to do that. I really want to thank you for your interest and attention, continued support and encouragement. I've heard a lot of good things from a lot of you about these videos, which I'm doing on a bi-weekly basis for subscribers like you. Tell your friends. If you think they can benefit from this information, enroll them. Ask them to sign up so they can start receiving my videos. Finally, I hope all of you are staying safe in these difficult circumstances.